introduced, you'll be introduced about our leadership apex and also leadership in the 14 working groups that we have. And also for those who have missed the launch and the midterm policy dialogue, you'll definitely more than welcome to engage with that. Have said so, I would like to introduce C20 leaders. On my right, it is our Sherpa, Mr. Mabalane Mfundisi. And then next to me, there's our chairperson, Mr. Tulani Chifuta. They are going to take us through this journey. And please just bear in mind that after, we're also going to have a question and answers. Once they have delivered the statement, and our colleague Mpo will definitely read some of the questions that are going to be raised from people who have joined us online. Without any further ado or without any waste of time, Chairperson, take it away. Thank you.
Facilitator of the session, my colleague and Sherpa of C20 South Africa, Mr. Mabalane Mfundisi. Colleagues and esteemed members of the media, good morning. And thank you very much for making time in your hectic schedules to give an ear to what we have to say as C20 engagement group under G20. We start by indicating that C20 is one of the officially recognized engagement groups under G20. And C20 organizes civil society in the broad sense of different sectors of society that we organize and represent. Although some of the sectors that we represent may have engagement groups of their own, but Civil20 or C20 as it has come to be known becomes the melting pot of all of those. As it is in South Africa, C20 is led by national apex organizations that represent a broad section of activism in sectors of civil society, including sectors such as youth, women, persons with disability, the civics, the cooperatives, the informal sector, traditional leaders, faith-based organizations, coalitions and campaigns, social movements, NPO networks, and issue-based organizations. We take pride in the fact that from the beginning of our work in December 2024, to date, we have been able to register more than 1,900 civil society organizations that have declared interest in participating in the C20 structures and processes. These organizations are drawn from South African civil society, from the African continent, and the rest of the world, as in the countries that are member countries of G20. We have taken a conscious decision of making this as the first South African G20 to be less about South Africa, but more about Africa as a whole. And that you will see in the architecture of the structures that we have established. In all our engagements, we are guided by the standing principles of C20 that have been well established from the beginning of C20 in 2013, which include that of having a global character, transparency, independence, collaboration, inclusiveness, human rights and empowerment, continuity and predictability. C20 in South Africa has been able to establish all the necessary structures to drive the work of influencing the G20 processes. In the structures that we have, when you see me as a chairperson, there is a full office of the chairperson, which is made up of 3 deputy chairpersons, one of which is Ms. Sheila Mbele, drawn from the sector of traditional healers and the health sector, Dr. Zukinzo, drawn from the disability sector, and Ms. Noncedo Matubetube, drawn from the education sector. Our Sherpa, Mr. Mabalane Mfundisi, is also working with other Sherpas, one of which is Mr. Skumbuzo Mbanza, drawn from the civics, and Rocher Kester, drawn from the LGBTQI sector, and the head of our secretariat, Mr. Nhlanhla Ndlovu. The substantive work of C20 is organized and driven through 6 clusters that we have, which clusters have a breakdown of 14 working groups, which are in direct mirror of the working groups that government has. That was a conscious decision on our part that we don't want to leave any space of opportunity unattended. So for every word that governments have in their working groups, we want to present our voice to be represented there. The Sherpa is going to say something in detail about the clusters and the working groups that we have. We do want to report that from 22 to 24 June 2025, we convened a very successful midterm policy dialogue in Sandton, South Africa, which was attended by more than 300 warm bodies inside the room and more than 1,800 representatives following virtually online. And the delegates that attended that session again represented organizations from South Africa, the African continent, and the rest of the world. The outcomes of our deliberations in that policy dialogue were fortunate enough to be timely, that the dialogue took place right on the eve of the 3rd and the midterm Sherpa meetings of governments, which took place in Sun City in Northwest Province from 25 to 27 June 2025. In the meeting of governments of the world organized under G20, we were then given an opportunity to present what are the emerging policy proposals from the policy dialogue that we hosted as C20. And we had an opportunity of presenting in that midterm meeting of Sherpas as a starting point of influencing the governments that are organized under G20. Amongst other high-level issues we can highlight, we can include the fact that all our deliberations have taken a deep dive on the theme that South Africa has adopted for its presidency of G20, focused on solidarity, equality, and sustainability, which we believe the theme on its own is about coexistence, collaboration, and partnerships. You cannot be in solidarity with yourself. There has to be a second and a third party for you to be in solidarity with. You can't be equal to yourself. There has to be a second, a third party against which you measure equality. Sustainability cannot be measured through your own actions alone. Yes, your actions can count as an input action, but that which accounts for sustainability are actions and impacts that will go and outlive your own existence. And so, that brings to essence that Indeed, the theme on its own is about that coexistence, collaboration, and partnerships that we're talking about. Our meaning to the theme is that we have different role players that can play different but complementary roles between governments and non-government actors, civil society not being least of those. At the very least, the volatile geopolitical developments reflect the vulnerabilities of our economies to external shocks, almost instantly finding expression on the daily lives and experiences of the people. And the point we're driving here is that on the slightest provocation of a conflict between Russia and Ukraine, and we cannot get fertilizer, our agricultural sector is affected, and you know the knock-on effect on the food prices emanating directly from there. We further believe that the world is faced with transitions that emanate from global change drivers. And as such, economic and labor market policies should embrace and maximize the leverage of transitions that are brought about global change drivers on technological advancements, on digitalization, on demographic changes, and climate change. And the call we are making as civil society is that we tend to make a one-sided call for a just transition focused on energy. Yes, the energy transition must be just, the same way as the demographic transition must be just, the same way as the technological transition must be just, and climate change. The G20 Presidency of the Republic of South Africa is committed to promote a people-centered, development-oriented G20 that fosters inclusive economic transformation rather than economic dominance by the few over the majority. Our call is for an inclusive economic growth for shared prosperity. This call is buttressed by a bold claim that all our endeavors must seek to bring people to the center of economic activity, as players, as contributors, and indeed as beneficiaries of these economic policies and programs that we are implementing. We further believe on social transformation that education and health are the two most significant public services that if you add the variable of economic growth, they account for Human Development Index. Equally, it is education and health that must never depend on your social standing in society for you to get good quality of those services. Your access to education and health must never depend on your level of affordability. Governments must do everything possible to make sure that the poorest of the poor get the best quality of services on education and health. Until and unless we graduate people from poverty into self-reliance and sustainable livelihoods, we believe we will be massaging the challenge of poverty. Our interventions as policy proposals must seek to break the perpetuation of the cycle of poverty. And evidence in literature suggests that there are 4 interventions that are proven beyond doubt, including by societies like China, that have reversed the tide of poverty, which include education and skills, which include direct employment and public employment programs, entrepreneurship and social protection, are some of those interventions. If implemented with discipline, they will begin to break the cycle of poverty. And we believe that poverty must receive the attention it deserves in the outcomes of G20. The governments and social partners must foster better strategic policy alignment between macroeconomic policies employment and labor market policies, sectoral economic policies, and skills development policies. It is only when we begin to maximize the leverage of the nexus between education, skills, labor market, and the economy that we are going to see the benefit accruing to the people. And so we believe that the nexus of all those, that triangle of policies, must be intentional about being pro-employment and job-rich. We recommend that there must be a dedicated focus, as we presented to governments of G20 in Sun City, that there must be a dedicated focus on programs that will implement youth employment from both governments and the private sector. Society must do everything to invest in the lives of young people through education, employment, entrepreneurship, and the economy, in order for society as a whole to draw the demographic dividend. We cannot expect to draw a dividend where we have not made investments. So it is through the investments that we must make that we can have a bold claim and expectation of drawing the dividend from our young people. And youth employment should be one of the biggest services that we place in the hands of young people. Our deliberations have explored discussions on issues of debt, trade, inclusive growth. Many regions of the world are constrained by a low growth trajectory and need bold structural reforms to lift economic growth. And developing economies must be given space for debt relief and even cancellation in order to redirect debt service costs towards productive economic activities. This, for South Africa, is as true as it is for many developing economies. The impasse that we had about the adoption of our national budget also talks to the very same point, that when we say one of the biggest cost drivers of our budget is debt service costs, and no one says anything about it, we are rising as civil society to say there has to be relief that comes from there, so that money that could have gone to service the debt is money that is relieved into productive economic activities that can bear a leverage down the line. The critical mineral endowments that we are blessed with should serve a critical role of catalyzing inclusive economic growth through beneficiation based on reindustrialization to drive growth and employment. We advocate for the mainstreaming of the plight of the vulnerable and marginalized populations and communities across all the thematic policy areas of advocacy that we drive, which policy areas must cater for youth, women, persons with disability, the rural communities, the LGBTQI communities, and any other of the vulnerable and marginalized communities. Equality cannot be achieved without raising the base of the marginalized people through deliberate implementation of measures that support empowerment and transformation. And we are making this bold point to buttress what has already been said in many other platforms, that the calls for South Africa to dump its transformation policies in favor of a free-for-all will not serve the essence of the democracy that we live in South Africa, which must appreciate that we enter this democratic discourse from different points of origin and advantage and disadvantage. It is only through empowerment and transformation that we can begin to raise the base of those that have always been vulnerable and marginalized, so that they have an equal claim to this democratic society that we live in. We believe that we must spare no effort in advancing the transformation and democratization of global structures of governance and the global financial architecture in such a way that we build them to be structures that are fit for purpose. In order to yield collective ownership of the outcomes of G20, its structures and processes and outcomes should promote active citizenry through people-to-people diplomacy, emphasizing the role of ordinary citizens and non-state actors in promoting mutual respect, cultural exchanges, and international cooperation. Ours must be a truly people-centered and driven process of meaningful engagements. At its best, the focus of our deliberations and policy proposals must help us to create public value. In essence, the notion of creating public value is about creating value for the citizens and placing the people at the center of all developments. When we talk about economic growth, it must never be about economic growth for economic growth by the few for the few. It must have a direct bearing to the general population of our society. In order to mitigate the trust deficit and build confidence, the G20 member countries should consider implementing legacy projects that are linked to the outcomes of G20 that will be hosted in South Africa in 2025. Differently from others, we believe what should be the glaring success factor for G20 South Africa must be action, action, and more action on the outcomes that will be agreed upon in the summit in South Africa. Beyond the midterm point of June, as we enter in July, C20 will be undertaking mass-based community-level consultations and engagements, and we believe that every voice matters. The Sherpa is going to take us through some level of detail on the nature of the activities that we'll be undertaking. But the essence of the outreach that we want to undertake is such that every voice matters. We want to be in every corner of South Africa such that a person who will not be in the Summit of Governments in November must be so proud and confident that I may not have my foot in the floor of the summit, but the views that I harbor are represented by the leadership of C20. That's how broad and wide we want to undertake our outreach and consultations at a community level. The working groups will continue to do their work. Each working group will produce a policy brief, which policy brief will be consolidated into what we take as a policy pack. It is that policy pack that will be summarized into a declaration that we are going to present into the meeting of the heads of states in November as the voice of civil society. Ours is to influence about policy proposals that make direct changes in the lives of the people. And as I indicated, I am going to invite the Sherpa to take us through the details of our working groups and some of the activities that we'll be undertaking from now until the end of the year, leading us into the summits. Thank you very much, ladies and gentlemen.
Thank you so much, Chairperson. You may come through.
No, thank you, Chairperson. Colleagues, morning again. I'm going to share the details of the clusters that we have for our working groups and the work plan, which is as follows. The C20 South Africa leadership is overseeing a consultative process to deliver a policy pack and declaration as outlined by our chairperson. That will be handed over to the G20 president in November at the 22nd and 23rd meeting. Way ahead of that, we should have completed our policy pack, which date is to be confirmed, but by end of September. So by end of July, we will be having our draft one. End of August, we'll be having our draft 2, and in September, we'll be polishing and fine-tuning our policy pack. We have 6 clusters that we have put together for these working groups, and the clusters are led by civil society leaders from South Africa, from the rest of Africa, as well as globally. the approach that we have taken in driving this work is to give that responsibility to the South Africans who are part of the leadership of these working groups, some of our African brothers and sisters to be leading them, and to be supported by brothers and sisters from the global south in the main and those from the global north. We have people that come from Russia, India, Indonesia, Kenya, all over, that we have given to this responsibility. There's many of us, and there's only 14 working groups. So we have 14 men and women whose leadership of the clusters, of the working groups, need to ensure that the voices of communities are represented. So for us, this is not a South African process. It's a process that is led from South Africa, but it brings all of us. Now we have cluster 1 that deals with finance, and it has one working group under it dealing with trade, financial architecture, and sustainable development, and it is led by Ms. Memory Kachamba from Kenya. On cluster 2, that is dealing with global governance, it has 2 working groups under it, and the working groups, the first one is working group number 2, titled People to People Interaction and Solidarity, and it is led by Ms. Gillian Moses from South Africa, who is also from the persons living with disabilities. We also want to emphasize this, that our approach is to leave no one behind and to provide the responsibilities to all of us to contribute and not sit on the sidelines and commiserate about having been left behind. The third working group is on democratic governance, civic space, anti-corruption and access to justice, and it is led by Ms. Bongiwe Ndondo from South Africa. Under cluster 3, we have, which is dealing with food security. Oh, by the way, let me just indicate the cluster on finance that I have outlined is linked to the solidarity theme of government. As you know, the government themes is on solidarity, is on equality and sustainability. So what we have done is to say, what are the things that we're doing that are contributing towards that through our working groups and through our cluster. So cluster that is dealing with issues linked to equality has cluster 3 focusing on food and poverty, and it has 4 working groups underneath it, and this cluster is led as follows. We have working group number 5, led by Ms. Mpiwa Mangwiro Tsanga from South Africa. It's dealing with women and gender. Working group number 6 on cultural diversity and recognition and embracement, led by Princess Nikki Webam from South Africa. We have working group number 7 on sustainable and resilient communities and disaster risk reduction, led by Ms. Megan N. Briede from South Africa, and working group 8 on tourism, led by Mr. Tulani Nzima from South Africa. The final 2 clusters fall within the sustainability theme, and they have 2 clusters that they are focusing on. Cluster 5 of the sustainability component is on human capital development, and it has 4 working groups, which are as follows. Working group number 9, that is dealing with quality education for future sustainability, which is led by Ms. Pila Sande Mkhuzo from South Africa. We have working group number 10 on employment opportunities and retention, led by Mr. Spusiso Mkhize from South Africa. Working group 11 on equitable health for all, led by Ms. Nomba Sasizwe Kuluwe, also from South Africa. And the last one in this cluster is the working group 12 on science research and innovation investment, led by Mr. John Mdluli, also from South Africa. The last cluster is cluster 6, which deals with just transitions and innovation, and it has 2 working groups as follows. Working group number 13, which is focusing on digital and inclusive economies, is led by Mr. Thando Lukuko from South Africa, and working group number 14, the last one, on energy just transition, environment and climate sustainability, led by Ms. Wanjiku Wairia from Kenya. Those are the 6 clusters we have divided into the 14 working groups, and work that they are doing is to ensure that we have these policy briefs that are going to be consolidated into our policy pack, summarized into the declaration that our chairperson will outline when the heads of state meet. Lastly, members of the media, please note the following C20 activities that we are currently engaging upon, and we invite you to be part and parcel of those activities. We have outlined the engagement and development of the 14 policy briefs, which will culminate in the policy pack that we should be ready by the 22nd and 23rd to be presenting. To ensure that these documents include a multiplicity of voices from civil society actors in South Africa, the rest of Africa, and globally, the following are activities that we will be undertaking as we move forward. One is the provincial consultations in all 9 provinces of the Republic of South Africa, with a focus on grassroots participation. Many a times, and in the engagement that we have, and given the approach towards ensuring that we have the legacy projects, sometimes people think that this is a platform for entrepreneurship, which is fine. But at the main, we're saying this is a World Cup of ideas that we need to package so that government leaders can actually integrate in the policies that they put together to make a better world for all of us. So we want people and their views. We will get those views through the provincial consultations that we will have. South Africa is a small, big country. So even our efforts to go to the 9 provinces will not reach every nook and cranny of the Republic. But at least where we will be, we will gather as many voices to ensure that that which we have on the table, people can contribute. And as the chair said, when it is articulated, somebody must say, it kila meleo. And as the motto of the G20 says, "Rekaufela," they must be able to see themselves and say that. Engagement with the African civil society, African governments and diplomats from the G20 countries and African countries and the diaspora communities. And this will include a dialogue with the President of the Republic of South Africa. And that engagement will happen in August, once our draft 1 is ready, because we will be socializing that which we have so that people can strengthen it. The third area is engagement with the global leaders and civil society leaders in international platforms, including but not limited to the UN General Assembly. We will have a delegation that will go there and engage, especially our American counterparts. As we know, the G20 is going to transition from South Africa and go into the US, and we need to be giving over to our US civil society. So on the sidelines of the UN General Assembly that's taking place in September, we'll have those particular engagements with our colleagues as we continue to socialize the policy pack and to prepare for them taking over. We'll also go to the 9th Tokyo International Conference on African Development ticket. C20 is also invited to exhibit and participate in these events, to host side events as part of socializing of the C20 policy pack and C20 declaration. We will have the people-to-people engagement through sports, arts, and culture. I'm sure some of you have been following the Club World Cup, and during the course of the Club World Cup, a team that was not part of that process, Liverpool, lost one of its players through a car accident together with his brother, Diogo Jota. And you would have seen the response of the world, and this speaks to our approach towards people-to-people engagement, especially using sports as a tool that connects all of us together. And within sports, we see all the issues that we have in the 14 working groups. So in this regard, C20 will host a soccer match and a big concert as side activities of C20 with a truly global look and feel. These activities will take place in 9 provinces and culminate in major events taking place. On the 15th of November, we'll have a big music event. We'll have local South African artists, as well as on the 16th of November, we'll have a soccer match that will feature a team from the Premier Soccer League and a team from one of the African countries whose details will be communicated in due course. In the main, when people arrive there, they want to have fun, but we will be using those particular platforms to ensure people understand that we are hosting the G20 and what the G20 actually means for them and what we would want to see them doing in terms of the processes that we have put in place. We'll also have the C20 Summit. This is the culmination after we would have done all the consultation between the 12th and the 14th of November. we will have the C20 consultation. Resources permitting, please do understand we are mobilizing the resources for all of these things to happen. Our plan is to gather 3,000 civil society actors from across the world, from Africa, from South Africa, together as we communicate what we would have put in place in terms of our policy pack, the policy, the various documents that we have, and the declaration. So we will have them, the details of where that will happen. We will communicate, but as the chair said, we have over 1,900 organizations that have registered to be part and parcel of this, and they continue to be part and parcel of us. So we want no one to be left behind. But 2,000 people in a country that has just over 60 million inhabitants, and that must bring people from all over the globe. It's 2,000 greatest men and women whose presence will be part of history. Please remember, the next time South Africa may host the G20 will be in 2044, if it is organized the way it is, where there's 19 countries, the African Union and the European Union as part of that. So from 2025, some of us may be old men, old women, or some of us may have departed this earth. So we want to make it count, and it must count. So when you are there as part of the C20 Summit from the 12th to the 14th of November, you would be part of history making. There's also going to be the G20 Social. This is a platform that the Brazilian government put in place. The South African president adopted it in his maiden speech as he took over the baton on the 3rd of December 2024. President Ramaphosa indicated that South Africa will also host the G20 Social. C20 is being engaged with other stakeholders to shape this G20 Social, but this will be a stadium-packed engagement where those that are part of our 2,000 will be part and parcel of many others that would have been mobilized, so that the issues that President Ramaphosa and other presidents are going to be talking about in the enclosed space that Nasrec will be. We are told that the G20 Summit is going to be in Nasrec. So we know the type of these engagements. Those places are fortresses that you can't get into. But that which they talk about in the fortress must actually represent you, and you will have been represented as part of our policy pack development, as part of our social C20 Summit, and as part of us taking the voices into the G20 Summit. The G20 Summit is expected to take place between the 18th and the 20th of November, which will be just 2 days before the main G20 Summit. If at all, none of us going to the G20 Summit all, our chairperson will be there, and he'll be given that 5-10 minutes of fame to speak for and on all our behalf, because the G20 meeting ultimately is like that penalty kick that is taken on the last minute of the game by players like Lionel Messi or those that have missed penalty kicks at the dying minutes, and we remember them more than we remember those who scored those. So I'm sure Comrade Tulani will not be remembered as a player who missed the penalty in the dying minutes of the game at the G20 as he represents us. Ladies and gentlemen, thank you very kindly. That is what we will be engaging upon as we mobilize all people of the world, whether they are physically present with us or they participate in the working groups, to make sure that our voices count.
Thank you so much, Sherpa. That was the two-leg media briefing presentation presented by our Sherpa and the chairperson. Now, I'm going to allow questions from the floor, and Ceci Mpo will also double-check if we have questions from the online. If we do, so let's start with questions right now. Please ask questions where you didn't get it right. Any question? That simply means that it was loud and clear. Must I assume so? If you wanted to raise your hands and then you want to see if the first person raised the hands, you may do so now. Do we, is it simple? Okay, all right. So we also don't have questions from online. So that simply means that for those who would like to do one-on-one interview, feel free to do so. They are all yours. So let me just double check again before we close this media briefing. Any question? No. Silence means complete. So therefore, the media briefing I declare closed. You are more than welcome to do one-on-one interview. Thank you. And thank you so much for honoring this media briefing. We really appreciate. And from our colleague, Pratemba and Sesimpo, you did a great job, and then well done. Thank you. Yeah, and feel free, we will also